Hello, and welcome to the Crane Bag Podcast. I am Jay Leeming. Thank you for joining me here. Come on in and have a seat. I recently spoke with the poet Steve Scafidi, who lives in West Virginia and is the author of many amazing books of poems. We began our conversation, naturally enough, with a poem from Steve's book, Cabinet Maker's Window, available from Louisiana State University Press and published in 2014. Here we go.
This is called If Faulkner is Wrong and We Don't Endure or Prevail. And it's a response to in 1950 when William Faulkner won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And he gave a really beautiful and kind of still shocking and brief speech of acceptance, where he expresses an unbreakable faith in humanity, in that we will not blow ourselves up or disappear, and it's a claim that that humanity will endure and prevail. And so I wrote this in 2014 in a different world, though 1950 was terrifying, and our world today seems that way as well. So I wrote this. If Faulkner is wrong and we don't endure or prevail, drums for the body desiccated dark down, way down deep in Mississippi, where the silver wisp of the mustache remains maybe. Drums for the hopeful dreaming in the meaning of life. What a stupid phrase, what a stupid phrase. Drums for the killer and the willing. Drums for the long gone and the still to come. Drums for the clothes tattered in the weather. A sweatshirt, maybe, that was red and white. Drums for the body no one has found, and drums for the hair still long along the skull that remains open from a tire iron or a hammer down. Come down drums for the shin bone of Beowulf, pocked and slender under the mountain. Slow drums for the jawbone of Garcia Lorca, lost in Spain. Drums for the box of bones the coroner sifts through, the cardboard box, the yellowed, broken, gnawed-on bones of someone lost to our humanity, come undone or come at last to its full expression, killing the one loved best, or some unlucky one whose death, like most, was unguessed, so sudden and so fiercely come. Drums for the dead and gone, and all of us who have come and gone and will continue on. So the heart drums, the words they come. So the heart drums, the words they come, though nothing comes to save you. Drums for what was beautiful and did no good, or did just some. Drums for the stupid, murderous ones we always were. Drums for William Faulkner.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
It's a funeral march.
I hear the song of it, it's great and how musical that is, the rhymes coming in.
Yeah.
How'd this poem begin for you?
My editor at one time said he read the first, that's from a book called The Cabinet Maker's Window. And my editor, as he usually did, rejected my first submission of it. And he said, and it was quite different at the time. And he said, there's a light touch that's too light. It is part of your imagination, is part of your person. You want to float and to fly everywhere. It is how I took what he said. I'm not sure exactly what he said at the time, but I took it like that there was something without gravity. And so I thought of that. And then I settled down into that question that, Faulkner says, which at the time I wrote this, I was also teaching at Johns Hopkins, and I was using his speech in my class. But he said, he says in that speech, one of the things is that what lasts in writing, in literature, is the heart in conflict with itself. And so that's what I went for, is the great conflict I had that I don't acknowledge usually, which is, like he says, are we going to blow ourselves up or are we going to last?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a deep pessimism, I guess, that I have, uh, even more today. And I think that speaks to it. But I'm amazed by, and people should go out of their way and read it. It's just like 4 paragraphs, short, brief paragraphs of Faulkner's. But his statement of faith in humanity is so brief, but so serious. It's as if someone, a devout priest, said it. Uh, his faith is unbreakable, and to me, I don't have many certainties after childhood about things. I do have some, but I don't allow myself some certainties. And I don't think I allow myself the certainty that he expresses, that we
Mm-hmm.
will endure and we will prevail.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that, but I'm amazed by an artist and not a religious person, though maybe they're similar, who would express that certainty the way he has, with an unbreakable faith. And I think to myself of him writing in the 30s, writing essentially, the that a reader would find his language like swimming in an ocean,
Mm-hmm.
to be almost lost and struggling for breath. And he was writing in the 30s for someone, and he was very much influenced by, the surrealist movement and that. But the fact that he wrote from his loneliness about the things that mattered to him in a way that mattered to him,
Mm-hmm.
I think embodied a certain faith that I've probably never had even a bit of. Um,
Yeah.
that may not be fair to me, but I look at someone like him as a young man unknown, in Oxford, Mississippi,
Mm-hmm.
writing in the darkness of his study the way he did,
Mm-hmm.
required something that I think he expressed in 1950 in that speech.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. So you feel you haven't had that unshakable faith.
Well, I have an unshakable faith in something, and it's almost secret, but I do have it, and it has to do with my own imagination and the
Mm-hmm.
imagination of writers I love.
Mm-hmm.
That I do think it's there's something unbreakable there, something
Mm-hmm.
that uh captures, you know, the germ of humanity at its best, and what we do with it we'll see. But I feel like yeah, I think I have an unbreakable faith in the imagination as not benevolent, but as something useful. But it's also dangerous. But anyway, I think I have a faith. I can only speak personally, not largely like that, but I do have an unbreakable faith in my own imagination
Yeah.
to receive and transform my experience.
And it's interesting, like our listeners don't know this, but you're a poet and also a cabinet maker, right?
Right.
And so often in our culture, at least in my experience, it's sort of like there's the practical stuff, like the food, the shelter, and then if you got time, there's imagination as like the cherry on the sundae. Um,
Right.
so you work with your hands, building stuff. Like if I didn't know you or your work and somebody said, "Oh, what kind of poems does he write?" I might say, "Well, sonnets or something, something
Right.
really solid."
Right.
So, not that your poems aren't solid. So I guess I'm wondering, how that manifests for you, like imagination in your life and your work, that unshakable faith. But it for you, it isn't the cherry on the sundae. It's something
No,
crucial.
and for you, it's not either. I know. I can tell. Um, it's like it becomes the way to get through the day, to survive. That's why we read, but also when we step outside of the house, and we put the world back together every single day. As soon as you open your eyes, you start doing that, and that's we take it for granted, but that's that imaginative work that is practical and useful, but also
Mhm.
surprising, when you either see something new, like an owl on a fence post that you didn't expect, or else you think you see it, you know,
Mhm.
and that's also enough sometimes to get me through the day. I mean, every morning you wake up and to figure, do we keep on with this or not? I think there's a part, maybe it's not as said aloud like that by all of us, but there's something, you kind of stake take stock every morning in a way. And the imagination provides the answer to that question every day.
Mhm.
The things I hear, the things, I see, what people say to me, how we engage, it's exhausting by the end of the day, but often it's thrilling too that we put together, these 24 hours and not to even mention what's happening while we sleep. And these we're not even paying attention and we're putting things together constantly. I don't find the unconscious and the conscious that different when you're a writer or an artist and you're constantly, it's almost out of control. But really you learn as a writer or whatever to kind of get your canoe out and paddle the waves or the current, whatever, and find your way.
Mhm.
But yeah, what I'm saying is I guess it remains a mystery, and
Mhm.
I have faith in the mystery of things is not being murderous, but of being um uh lovely and caretaking,
Yeah.
like what it is to be human in some way.
Mm. Hmm.
I don't mean to speak so largely. I'm sorry.
No, it's you. I mean, by reading that poem, we've got drums in the room, and we've got Lorca's skull, and we've got Faulkner working. So
Yes.
that's a beautiful thing that you've summoned those things for us, and so things come out of them, right? We sing this little song of chat that we're singing. I was gonna say, you said like imagination is like, we use it to put the world together. I think you said something close to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But also like hearing your poem and reading it, I have this sense of like, wow, this is a guy who loves to be swept away. And
Yeah.
and and sort of in hearing it, I'm swept away as well. Like it's really a wonderful voyage, Steve, just to start with Faulkner and the drums, and then you take us so many places. I mean, is that something you seek or have found outside of poetry as well, or not?
Yeah, I think I don't have to go far to seek it. Like for example, a river is a perfect example to me of like what language is like for a writer and for a reader when you find something you love. There is that swept away. We talk about it all the time, of like being lost in a book. And I think we lived, my wife and I lived for about 4 or 5 years right on the Shenandoah River, and I've never forgotten that companionship of, and I was writing all the time, and I'd be up at night, and you could hear the river moving, and in the winters you could hear it freeze, and you could hear it unlock, and whatever. But I think one of the most dramatic experiences as a reader as a person, was being kind of lost in things like Lord of the Rings. But then I think the story of it, and then I think it was the language of Faulkner, who I read very young and it didn't really stick. It was when I kept reading it later in my 20s that then, I recognized that the language was very much, he seems less like a river and more like an ocean to me. About it's like, but whatever it is a thing of great force that you have to assent to. You have to give
Mhm.
your assent to, you get into it, and you have to stop worrying about where we are every moment. You have to let go of it. And so that is that being swept away. And amazingly, he rewards that. I
Mhm.
find he rewards that over and over again. And so I think that poem wants to honor that in him.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
even though I'm banging the drum, the poem is the one that's banging the drums, but it's doing in the way that came from him.
Yeah.
So to me, there's something unkill. I'm mourning the death of something, but the way I'm doing it, it seems to me I'm also honoring what might just be unkillable.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. I love what you say about our assent, giving our assent to that sort of being swept away in that
yeah.
ocean. And yeah, I think perhaps like you, but like a lot of folks, I was kind of often raised in school. Like a poem is something you have to figure out. Like it's kind of code for something which could have been said more easily another way.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
As opposed to it's a spell or it's a these are the words and this is the only way to say this,
yeah,
is how it came out.
yeah. I mean, maybe like you. I mean, I hated poetry as a teenager. I mean, because it was in school and I didn't care for school and I didn't
Mhm.
care for being presented with something that was a puzzle, and I was always wrong whenever I had to think about it. So I didn't give a damn about it. And so I discovered, later on, like 19, pretty quickly after I started reading things on my own, like Dylan Thomas and Whitman, and again, both of those writers, there is that being swept away, in my opinion.
Mhm.
There is that you have to like to live. I mean, you have to have a certain relationship with ambiguity. I think that if you can have a good relationship with ambiguity, and I think that's a lifetime project for some of us. But I think writers, John Keats talked about it in his Negative Capability, this
Mhm.
willingness to live in uncertainty and doubt without too much hankering after fact and reason, he says in a letter to
Mhm.
his brother about what he said Shakespeare had, in spades. He had that ability. And I think that would be something useful to teach to high school kids to live in ambiguity and to bear it and even enjoy it. Like
Mhm.
anytime you read a novel, for me, the first 30 pages, I'm lost, I don't care what kind of novel it is. It can be straightforward, whatever, but I don't know anything the first 30 pages, and then I do. I've found my way. But that kind of giving assent to a poem where you cannot say this is what it means,
Mhm.
if you can read a poem and not worry too much after about what it means, I think you're on the right step. I think that's the with any art. I mean, to reduce any art to what it means is the same thing as like walking out into your yard and looking at my black oak tree out there. What is it? What do you mean? That's not the right question to ask the tree,
Yeah.
It's something else. I mean, we couldn't ask ourselves that and have any kind of answer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's beautifully said. Yeah. It's like a wilderness, and we want to like build a little safe house with a wall around it,
Yeah.
as opposed to like wandering out and like falling asleep under a tree,
Yeah,
and
right.
and
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with wanting meaning too. We are creatures of it, but it's
Mhm.
like be patient. It feels like with poems, to take pleasure in the not knowing, but in the pleasure of the words is enough sometimes upon the first reading of something. And
Yeah.
for me, that's enough. And then if I'm intrigued enough, I'm going to read it again. And then after a while, some poems can feel very much like I have built a little outpost in the wilderness. And they
Mhm.
can, I feel protected in that poem in some way because of
Mhm.
its familiarity and because the secret that has been revealed to me by having read the poem a couple times. But I don't mean a secret like a puzzle necessarily. I mean, and I mean something valuable that I needed to hear.
Mhm.
Philip K. Dick, the science fiction writer. He
Oh
has a
yeah.
great quote, and he says there are two sentences that that are valuable to people. One sentence, if said to them, would change their life. The first sentence is one that might destroy them. The second sentence is full of what might make them whole. And to me, there's something about writing and encountering poems where I find no matter how difficult they are, they're always that second sentence or that thing that makes me whole or makes things whole.
Yeah.
Even though I know there are poems that have ripped me to shreds, the
Mhm.
fact that I've read it and put it together with my imagination and made something from it
Mhm.
means something to me.
Yeah. And it's a communal experience. It sounds like what you're saying.
Yes.
The writer writes it and you read it, and together, you make something whole. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the delight, the pleasure of words, and in this poem, it's cool because we've got this sort of, as you said, sort of funeral march energy, but there's also song, there's delight and in the rhymes that show up. And I mean, folks listening to this, you probably aren't looking at it on the page, but this isn't a poem that's like, rhyming. The rhymes are really clear, but to me anyway.
Interior rhyme and off rhyme and there's all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff going on, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't plan that ahead, right? I mean, this sort of,
No.
yeah.
No, I never do. I never plan. I mean, unless there are poems I planned ahead, but it's always not knowing and then going forward. And
Yeah.
then, there's revision and you can see patterns and you can revise towards the pattern that you're seeing.
Hmm.
But no, it wasn't planned.
Was there a moment where this poem surprised you, where you're like, "Oh, what the heck is that?"
Yeah. Yeah, I think it surprised me pretty much throughout. And but I think at the end too, there's like a rhyme at the end. It's almost like a couplet at the end.
Mhm.
Let me see exactly what it is. Drums for the stupid, murderous ones we always were, that always were, and drums for William Faulkner. That shocked me. But that's also something I do a lot in my poems. I will often, and it may be a fault, but I will make a rhyming force at the end of a poem that's, I think a hangover from reading so many sonnets, especially English sonnets, with that rhyming couplet,
Yeah.
that's always, it's just addictive to my ear. And I love it without any boundary.
Yeah, I mean, in the poems of yours that I've read, there's this combo of like this desire to sing and this desire to have a vision, perhaps. At least that's what
Yeah.
I feel. And those are, I don't know, those are great and healing things to put together, at least for me, because, a song can you take you away, but it's also happening right there. You've got the guitar, the singer, whatever it is, even if it's just playing on a speaker, it's like it's in that moment and it can't really be wrenched out of that moment as you're hearing it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, that it is itself and it can't be, the music can't be wrenched from it, that it is indivisible from what you're saying, is that the
Hmm.
music of saying it that makes it a poem, I think sometimes, not always, but yeah, there's something to, that even Wordsworth way back in 1800, 1799 said, that, asking for poems, where he was so surrounded by, the poems written by wealthy people who had nothing better to do than kind of show off writing useless sonnets to each other. He was like, well, poems can actually be useful. And they can describe and act the world around us. And that could even be the sound of a person actually speaking. Someone actually, we've all heard the music of someone not trying at all, but just talking, right?
Yeah.
And he points to that. And I think that was, I mean, that obviously was kind of revolutionary for 20th century poets, and still, and you and I come from the 20th century, right?
So we write like we talk for the most part.
Yeah, and so and yet the primal beginnings of poetry is song or prayer, or especially song, for a lot of us don't ever go away. Instead there is that sense of talk and song that combine. And to me it's always shocking, because I mean, I do expect it sometimes in a poem, of course, but I hear it out in the world all the time in this natural habitat, of conversation.
Steve, did you have much religion growing up?
Yes, I had
Yeah.
lots.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's behind a lot of it, to be honest. I was raised Catholic, and kind of seriously Catholic, and my family every night would recite prayers as a group, all kinds of Catholic prayers, like rosary prayers, and then we would go to bed. And so I had this chant. It was always a part, on a regular basis, a part of my life. And then the chant, carried on in churches and stuff. And then came old enough, and I said no to so much of any of that. But the chant remained. And I think this is what led me into poetry. And I think this is a good example of the chant in a way. Not a formal chant, but there's something for me that's mesmerizing when I read it, that I kind of get in get into the step of it. How about you? Do you have a lot of religion growing up?
I wouldn't say a lot. Let's see. We went to Episcopal church. The
Nice.
story, my mom wanted us to know what church was. That was the
Yeah.
quote. My dad liked singing in the choir, and like many, I went to that, and then I sort of in teenage years kind of drifted away.
Right.
So that was my church experience. But I too remember, things being said repeatedly every Sunday that are still kind of there in my.
Yeah. Yeah. The Episcopals, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about Protestant, but I have been to Episcopal Mass, and it shocked me how close to the Catholic Mass it was in some places.
Yeah.
And, but you can't go wrong with singing in any
Mhm.
church. It seems like that's the only part I ever really trust. It's like of the Trinity, the Holy Ghost is the only part I've ever trusted. But it's like the Holy Ghost is like in life when anyone's just singing.
it comes and visits us in that way.
Yeah, yeah, that sense of the divine, that I think I won't say it most poets, but there's something about the divine that interests me, I think. That's, and I think music and chant and falling by accident into meaning or rhythm reminds me of that might be what it is, because it
Yeah.
reminds me of that early singing that I loved.
Well, I've always felt healed by knowing, by aspiring at least to reach something beyond the everyday.
Yeah.
Not like the everyday is bad, but it's just, I want there to be more than like this room and
Yeah.
this wall. And so your poem is a great example of that because it calls me away to other places and I'm
Hmm.
sort of healed, in that way, which is cool.
Oh, I appreciate that. The heart in contrast with itself, Faulkner said, is what makes writing last. And the question of, are we going to endure? My answer lately is like, well, of course not. There's
Mm,
no way. And in fact, sometimes I feel like I'm rooting for oblivion.
mm,
And then I go, oh, don't do that. You have
mm,
children you love, and you have hope and things. So I go back and forth. I'm like a light switch that's being turned on and off and on and off and on and off in terms of whether we're going to endure or prevail. So this poem is just a moment of that, but I could easily write one that says, "Oh yeah, we're going to endure and prevail."
mm.
Maybe I should, in fact, especially in this moment where so much is being destroyed nationally and so much is and globally.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I do think even the poems that express a great negativity or a sorrow, this may be too much of a generalization, but I do think those poems exist ultimately in that second sentence of Philip K. Dick's,
Mhm.
that it's expression of deep pessimism. But I think ultimately it's not. I'm not the one to say. I'm the one who wrote it, so I should be quiet.
I think the expression of grief gives life and
Yeah,
gives nourishment to others. We're alive, and so we laugh and we have joy and we have sorrow also. And
yeah.
so it helps us be more alive, and that is just in itself a victory, I guess. Maybe.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here too.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to read this poem. If Faulkner is wrong and we don't endure or prevail, drums for the body, desiccated, dark down, way down deep in Mississippi, where the silver wisp of the mustache remains, maybe. Drums for the hopeful dreaming and the meaning of life. What a stupid phrase. What a stupid phrase. Drums for the killer and the willing, drums for the long gone and the still to come, drums for the clothes tattered in the weather, a sweatshirt, maybe, that was red and white, drums for the body no one has found, and drums for the hair still long along the skull that remains, open from a tire iron or a hammer down. Come down drums for the shin bone of Beowulf, pocked and slender under the mountain, slow drums for the jawbone of Garcia Lorca, lost in Spain, drums for the box of bones the coroner sifts through, the cardboard box, the yellowed, broken, gnawed on bones of someone lost to our humanity, come undone or come at last to its full expression, killing the one loved best, or some unlucky one whose death, like most, was unguessed, so sudden and so fiercely come. Drums for the dead and gone, and all of us who have come and gone and will continue on. So the heart drums, the words they come. So the heart drums, the words they come, though nothing comes to save you. Drums for what was beautiful and did no good, or did just some. Drums for the stupid, murderous ones we always were. Drums for William Faulkner.
My guest today has been the poet Steve Scafidi, reading from his book Cabinet Maker's Window, available from Louisiana State University Press. You can find out more about his work at stevescafidi.net. That's Steve, SCAFIDI.net. Thank you for joining me, and take care.